The text message arrived at 2:30 in the morning, buzzing my phone off the nightstand with all the subtlety of a fire alarm. I fumbled for it in the dark, careful not to wake Elise, though she'd probably slept through worse. The screen's blue glow burned my eyes as I read my mother's words. "Rent's due tomorrow. No, 200. Don't make your father come collect it." I sat there in the darkness of our bedroom, staring at those words, feeling something cold and heavy settle in my chest. At 44 years old, I was being pushed around by my own parents like some irresponsible teenager. The irony wasn't lost on me. I owned a successful contracting business, paid every bill on time, and kept a roof over my wife's head in a town where half the population struggled to make ends meet. But my father, Robert Harlan, had never seen it that way. To him, I was still the screw-up kid who chose hammers over Harvard. "Everything okay?" Elise's voice cut through the darkness, groggy but tinged with that edge of irritation she'd perfected over our 15 years of marriage. "Just Mom," I said, setting the phone face down on the nightstand. "Go back to sleep." She rolled over without another word, her back to me like a wall. That was us lately, two people sharing a bed but living in separate worlds. I lay there listening to her breathing even out, wondering when exactly we'd stopped being a team and started being roommates who occasionally argued about whose turn it was to buy milk. The rent thing had started 6 months ago. Dad had shown up at my workshop unannounced, dressed in his usual uniform of pressed khakis and a polo shirt that screamed, "I'm better than you." He'd looked around at my tools, my equipment, the half-finished cabinets for the Morrison job, and his lip had curled like he'd smelled something rotten. "Your mother and I have been talking," he'd said, not bothering with pleasantries. "We think it's time you started contributing to the family in a meaningful way." I'd been sanding a piece of oak at the time, and I remember thinking how satisfying it would be to sand down his ego the same way. "Contributing how, exactly? $1,200 a month? Consider it rent for all the years we supported your little hobby?" My little hobby. That's what he called the business I'd built from nothing. The business that employed 6 guys and their families. The business that had just landed a contract to renovate the entire town hall. I'd laughed, actually laughed, because what else could you do when your own father treated you like a charity case? "I haven't lived with you in 26 years, Dad." "No, but we paid for your community college. We co-signed your first truck loan. We gave you seed money when you started this." He'd waved dismissively at my workshop. "Venture. Time to pay the piper, Tom." The seed money had been $3,000 20 years ago. I'd paid it back within 2 years. The truck loan had been paid off in full, never missed a payment. And community college? I'd worked nights at the lumber yard to cover half the tuition myself. But facts had never mattered much to Robert Harlan. What mattered was control, and he'd found a new way to exert it. I'd tried reasoning with him. I'd tried pointing out the obvious flaws in his logic. But Dad had played his trump card, Mom's health. She needed treatments, he'd said. Expensive treatments. Their retirement fund wasn't what it should be. Family took care of family, didn't they? So I'd started paying. $1,200 a month every month, like clockwork. It hurt, but not enough to break us. What hurt more was the principle of it. The fact that my own father saw me as an ATM machine, a failure who owed him for the crime of existing. The next morning, I woke to an empty bed and the smell of coffee. Elise was already dressed for work, her dark hair pulled back in that severe bun she wore like armor, her makeup applied with military precision. She was beautiful in that sharp, untouchable way that made men look twice and think twice about approaching. At 42, she'd maintained the figure she'd had at 25 through sheer force of will and a gym membership she actually used. "You look tired," she said, not looking up from her phone as I shuffled into the kitchen. "Didn't sleep great?" She thumbed through her emails with the focus of a surgeon. Elise worked in marketing for a mid-sized firm in Portland, an hour's drive from our house in Millbrook, Maine. She'd climbed the ladder steadily over the years, and somewhere along the way, she'd started looking at me the way my father did, like I was something that hadn't quite lived up to expectations. "I need to transfer the rent money to Dad today," I said, pouring myself coffee. "That's going to make things tight this month." Again with this. She finally looked up, her green eyes cold. "Tom, you need to tell him no. This is ridiculous. It's family. It's extortion." She grabbed her bag, checked her reflection in the hallway mirror. "But do what you want. You always do." The door closed behind her with a finality that felt like punctuation on a sentence I hadn't finished reading. I stood there in my kitchen, coffee growing cold in my hands, and wondered when my life had become something I just endured rather than lived. Work was my refuge. Out on job sites with my crew, I was competent. Respected. Randy Pierce, my crew chief and closest friend, met me at the Morrison house at 7 sharp. Randy was ex-military, built like a tank, with a dry sense of humor that had gotten us through more than one difficult job. "You look like hell," he said by way of greeting. "Thanks, Randy. You're a real morale booster." Part of my charm. He handed me a coffee, the good stuff from the diner, not the swill I'd been drinking at home. "What's eating you?" I told him about the rent, about my parents' endless demands, about Elise's cold shoulder. Randy listened the way he always did, without judgment, letting me vent until the poison was out. "Your old man's a piece of work," he said finally. "You know that, right?" "Yeah, I know." "So why keep paying?" It was a good question. The answer was complicated, tangled up in guilt and obligation and the desperate hope that maybe, someday, Dad would look at me and see something worth being proud of. But I didn't say that. Instead, I shrugged and picked up my tool belt. Let's get to work. The Morrison job was a full kitchen renovation, the kind of project that paid well and looked great in the portfolio. We spent the morning ripping out old cabinets, careful to preserve the original hardwood floors. It was good, honest work, and for a few hours I could forget about rent payments and cold shoulders and the growing sense that my life was a house built on a foundation of sand. At lunch, Randy and I sat on the front porch, eating sandwiches and watching Millbrook go about its business. It was a nice town, the kind of place where people still waved to each other, and the biggest news was usually about high school football. I'd grown up here, knew every street and shortcut, every family and their business. It was home, for better or worse. "You hear about Greg Fallon's new development?" Randy asked, wadding up his sandwich wrapper. Greg Fallon. The name made my jaw tighten. Greg was everything my father wished I'd become. Successful, smooth, the kind of guy who wore suits that cost more than my truck payment and drove a BMW that gleamed like a promise. He ran Fallon Development, the biggest real estate company in 3 counties, and he'd made a fortune turning old properties into upscale condos and shopping centers. He was also Elise's business partner on some marketing project, though the details were always vague when I asked. "What about it?" "Buying up the old summer camp out by Crystal Lake. Plans to turn it into luxury rentals." Randy gave me a sideways look. "Heard he's working pretty close with Elise on the marketing strategy." Something in his tone made me pause. "What are you saying?" "Nothing, man. Just making conversation." But his eyes said different. Randy had never been good at hiding what he thought, and right now, he thought something was wrong. The afternoon dragged. I couldn't focus, kept thinking about Greg Fallon and his BMW and the way Elise had been coming home later and later these past few months. "Working late," she'd say. "Big project." And I'd believed her because what else was I supposed to do? Accuse my wife of cheating based on nothing but a feeling? But feelings had a way of being right. I got home at 6 to an empty house. No note, no text, nothing. I tried calling Elise, got voicemail. Tried again an hour later, same result. By 8 o'clock, I was pacing the living room like a caged animal, my mind spinning through possibilities I didn't want to consider. That's when I saw Mrs. Twombly outside, watering her garden in the twilight. Eleanor Twombly was 78, sharp as a tack, and had lived next door for as long as I could remember. She saw everything, forgot nothing, and had a way of knowing things before they became common knowledge. I walked over, trying to look casual. "Evening, Mrs. Twombly. Garden's looking good?" "Thank you, dear." She adjusted her glasses, gave me a look that was part sympathy, part something else. "You looking for Elise?" "She's working late again." Mrs. Twombly turned off her hose, wiped her hands on her apron. "Tom, you're a good boy. Always have been. So I'm going to tell you something, and you can do with it what you will." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" "I saw Elise's car outside Greg Fallon's condo last night. Around 10. It was still there when I went to bed at midnight." She patted my arm, her touch gentle. "I'm sorry, dear. I thought you should know." The world tilted. I stood there in Mrs. Twombly's yard, the smell of flowers and fresh-cut grass all around me, and felt something inside me crack. Not break, not yet, but crack, like ice under too much weight. "Thank you for telling me," I managed. "What are you going to do?" Good question. What was I going to do? Confront Elise? Follow her? Pretend I didn't know and let the crack spread until everything shattered? "I don't know yet," I said honestly, but I was going to find out. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elise's car parked outside Greg Fallon's condo, saw the two of them together in ways that made my stomach turn. When she finally came home at 11:30, I was sitting in the dark living room, waiting. "Jesus, Tom." She jumped when she saw me, hand flying to her chest. "You scared me. Why are you sitting in the dark?" "Long day," I said. How was work? Exhausting. She kicked off her heels, didn't quite meet my eyes. I'm going to take a shower and head to bed. How's the project with Greg going? She paused, just for a second. Fine. Good. We're making progress. That's great. What time did you leave the office? I don't know, Tom. 9? 9:30? Her voice had an edge now. Why the interrogation? Just curious. Just wondering why my wife is coming home at midnight from a job that supposedly ends at 5. I told you, we're working on a big project. These things take time. She was moving toward the stairs now, putting distance between us. I'm too tired for this conversation. Were you at the office, Elise? Or were you somewhere else? She stopped, turned slowly. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm asking a direct question. Where were you tonight? At work. With Greg, planning marketing strategies for his development project. She crossed her arms. Is that detailed enough for you, or do you want a minute-by-minute breakdown? I wanted to call her a liar. Wanted to throw Mrs. Twombly's information in her face. But something stopped me. Maybe pride, maybe fear of what would happen once the words were out there and couldn't be taken back. No, I said quietly. That's enough. She went upstairs without another word. I sat there in the dark, listening to the shower run, and made a decision. If Elise was cheating, I needed proof. Real proof. Not just a neighbor's observation. Because once I made an accusation like that, there was no going back. Our marriage would be over, one way or another. The next morning, I started watching. Not obviously, I wasn't about to turn into some stalker, but carefully, methodically, the way I approached a complicated build. I noted when Elise left for work, when she came home, the excuses she made for late nights. I checked our phone records online, saw hours of calls to a number I didn't recognize. I looked at our credit card statements, found charges at restaurants I'd never been to, at times when Elise claimed to be working late at the office. The evidence was circumstantial, but damning, and it was eating me alive. Randy noticed, of course. On Thursday, he pulled me aside at the Morrison job, his face serious. You want to tell me what's going on with you? Nothing. I'm fine. Bullshit. You've been distracted all week. Yesterday you measured the same cabinet opening 3 times and got 3 different numbers. That's not like you. I set down my tape measure, rubbed my eyes. I think Elise is having an affair. The words hung there between us, ugly and real. Randy's expression didn't change much, but his jaw tightened. With Fallon? Yeah, with Fallon. You sure? Not 100%, but sure enough. I told him about Mrs. Twombly, the late nights, the phone records. Randy listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. What are you going to do? He asked finally. Get proof, then decide. You need help? I looked at my friend, saw the loyalty there, the readiness to back whatever play I made. It meant more than he probably knew. Maybe. Yeah, I think I might. Randy nodded slowly. Then let's get you some proof. That Saturday, while Elise was supposedly at a marketing conference in Portland, Randy and I put our plan into action. I knew Elise's passwords. She'd never been particularly careful about security. And I knew she backed up her phone to the cloud automatically. It took Randy about 20 minutes to walk me through accessing her backup from my laptop. What we found made me wish I'd never looked. Photos, dozens of them. Elise and Greg at restaurants, at his condo, at what looked like a cabin by a lake. In some, they were clothed, in others, they weren't. The timestamps went back months. While I'd been paying my father's extortion rent, while I'd been working 12-hour days to keep us comfortable, Elise had been building a whole separate life with Greg Fallon. There were text messages, too, hundreds of them. Some were mundane, meeting times, restaurant reservations. Others were explicit enough to make me feel sick. But the ones that really got me, the ones that cut deepest, were the ones where they talked about me. Tom's so clueless, Elise had written. Sometimes I feel bad, but then I remember how boring he is, and I get over it. Greg's response, you deserve better than a contractor with sawdust in his hair. When are you going to leave him? Soon. I'm just waiting for the right moment. His parents are bleeding him dry anyway, he'll be broke soon enough, and then the divorce will be easy. I read that message 3 times, each time feeling something inside me harden. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that. Something colder, more calculated. Elise wasn't just cheating. She was planning, strategizing, waiting for me to be at my weakest before she struck. Tom. Randy's voice cut through my thoughts. You okay, man? Yeah. I closed the laptop, stood up. My hands were steady, my voice was calm. Yeah, I'm okay. What do you want to do? I looked at my friend, this man who'd been loyal when my own wife hadn't, and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I want to make them pay. The plan came together over the next few days. I wasn't going to confront Elise yet. That would tip my hand, give her time to prepare, maybe even clean out our accounts before I could protect myself. No, I was going to be smart about this. Patient. I was going to gather every piece of evidence I could, protect my assets, and then, when the time was right, I was going to burn their perfect little affair to the ground. First step, documentation. I copied everything from Elise's cloud backup. Photos, texts, emails. I saved it all to a secure drive that I kept at Randy's house. Then I made an appointment with a lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen who specialized in divorce cases. How bad is it? Patricia asked after I'd shown her the evidence. Bad enough. Does she know you know? No, and I want to keep it that way for now. Patricia nodded, made some notes. Smart. We'll need to protect your business assets, make sure she can't claim half of something she had no part in building. We'll also need to document her affair thoroughly. Maine isn't a no-fault state, and infidelity can affect alimony. I don't care about alimony. I just want to make sure she doesn't get what she doesn't deserve. Understood. Patricia looked at me over her glasses. Tom, I have to ask, are you sure you want to go through with this? Divorce is ugly even when it's justified. It's going to hurt, and it's going to be expensive. She called me boring, I said quietly. She laughed about how clueless I was. She's waiting for my parents to bleed me dry, so the divorce will be easier. Yeah, I'm sure. Patricia's expression softened slightly. Okay then, let's make sure you come out of this on top. Over the next week, I played the role of oblivious husband perfectly. I came home on time, asked about Elise's day, pretended everything was normal. It was harder than I'd expected. Every time she kissed me goodbye, every time she said, I love you, out of habit, I wanted to scream the truth at her, but I didn't. I smiled and nodded and went about my business, all while building my case. Meanwhile, my father kept calling about the rent. I'd paid this month's installment, but he was already hinting about next month, about additional expenses that had come up. I'd stopped arguing with him. Let him think he'd won. Let him think I was the same pushover I'd always been. He'd learn different soon enough. The break I'd been waiting for came on a Wednesday night. Elise announced she had another late meeting with Greg. They were finalizing the marketing strategy for his lakeside development. She'd be home late, maybe not until after midnight. No problem, I said. I've got some paperwork to catch up on anyway. She kissed my cheek, grabbed her bag, and left. I waited exactly 5 minutes, then called Randy. She just left. You ready? Born ready, brother. Meet you at the spot. The spot was a turnoff about a mile from Greg Fallon's condo, hidden by trees but with a clear view of the parking lot. Randy was already there when I arrived, his truck tucked into the shadows. I parked next to him and climbed into his passenger seat. You sure about this? Randy asked. Positive. We didn't have to wait long. At 7:30, Elise's silver Lexus pulled into the lot and parked next to Greg's BMW. We watched through Randy's binoculars as she got out, checked her reflection in the car window, and walked into the building. She didn't look nervous or guilty. She looked excited. Man, that's cold, Randy muttered. Yeah. We sat there for 3 hours. At 10:30, the lights in Greg's corner unit went out. At 11, they came back on, just for a few minutes, like someone was getting ready to leave. Sure enough, at 11:15, Elise emerged, her hair slightly mussed, her lipstick gone. She practically floated to her car. I took photos of everything, the arrival, the timing, the departure. It was all evidence, all ammunition for what was coming. What now? Randy asked as Elise's taillights disappeared down the road. Now? I started my truck, felt that cold anger settle deeper into my chest. Now we start making them pay. The opportunity came faster than I'd expected. On Friday, Elise mentioned she was having lunch with her best friend, Simone, at the Rusty Anchor, the local bar and grill that served as Millbrook's unofficial social hub. Simone was exactly the kind of friend Elise deserved. Gossipy, dramatic, and loyal only as long as it was convenient. Girls' lunch, Elise said, applying lipstick in the hallway mirror. I'll probably be back around 2. Then, have fun, I said, and meant it, because I was about to have some fun of my own. I waited until noon, then called the towing company I used for work. Hey, Mike, it's Tom Harlan. I need a favor. What kind of favor? The kind where you tow a silver Lexus from the Rusty Anchor parking lot and bring it to my workshop. Owner gave me permission. She's having some issues with the transmission. It was a lie, but Mike didn't question it. 20 minutes later, Elise's car was on a flatbed heading to my workshop on the edge of town. I met Mike there, slipped him an extra $100 for his discretion, and watched as he unloaded the Lexus into my locked garage bay. Then I went home and waited. The call came at 2:15. Elise's voice was shrill with panic. "Tom, someone stole my car." "What? Are you serious?" "Yes, I'm serious. I came out of lunch and it was just gone. I've called the police. I've called insurance." Slow down. Where are you?" "At the Rusty Anchor. Simone's here with me. Tom, what am I supposed to do?" "Did you check the whole parking lot? Maybe you parked somewhere different than you thought." "I'm not an idiot. I know where I parked." She was really worked up now, her voice rising. "Can you come get me?" "I'm on a job site in Brunswick. It'll take me at least an hour." Another lie. I was actually sitting in my living room, drinking coffee. "Can Simone give you a ride?" "She has to pick up her kids. Tom, I need you to come get me." "Elise, I literally can't. I'm in the middle of something. Take an Uber. I'll be home tonight and we'll figure it out." The silence on the other end was glacial. "Fine. Thanks for nothing." She hung up. I smiled into my coffee. Round one to me. Over the next few days, I let Elise twist in the wind. The police had no leads on her stolen car. Insurance was dragging their feet on the claim. She had to rent a car, which she couldn't really afford since she'd been spending so much on her affair with Greg. Every night, she complained about the inconvenience, the unfairness of it all. I made sympathetic noises and secretly enjoyed every second of her frustration. Meanwhile, I'd been doing some digging into Greg Fallon's business dealings. It turned out that Greg's success wasn't quite as legitimate as it appeared. Through some careful research and a few well-placed questions to people in the construction industry, I discovered that Fallon Development had been cutting corners on several projects, using substandard materials, bribing inspectors, violating zoning laws. Nothing huge, but enough to cause problems if the right people started asking questions. I made copies of everything I found and put them in a safe place. Insurance, for later. The next phase of my plan required help from an unlikely source. Simone. I'd been thinking about that lunch at the Rusty Anchor, about how Simone loved to gossip, loved to be the center of attention. If I played this right, I could turn Elise's best friend into an asset. On Thursday night, I went to the Rusty Anchor alone. It was karaoke night, and the place was packed with regulars. I spotted Simone at the bar, already 3 drinks in based on her flushed cheeks and loud laughter. Perfect. "Hey, Simone," I said, sliding onto the stool next to her. "Fancy meeting you here." "Tom." She threw her arms around me in a hug that smelled like wine and perfume. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry about Elise's car. That's just terrible." "Yeah, it's been rough. Can I buy you a drink?" "You absolutely can." 2 drinks later, Simone was in full gossip mode. I'd learned that Greg Fallon was such a catch, that Elise was so lucky to be working with him, and that, honestly, Tom, no offense, but you two never seemed like a great match anyway. "Really?" I kept my voice casual. "Why's that?" "Well, you know, Elise is so ambitious, so driven, and you're—" She waved her hand vaguely. "You're nice. But nice doesn't always cut it, you know?" "I guess not." I signaled for another round. "So you think Elise and Greg would be a better match?" "Oh my God, absolutely. They're like perfect together. Same goals, same lifestyle. Plus, Greg is loaded. No offense. None taken." I pulled out my phone, pretended to check a message. "Actually, I'm glad you think they're so perfect together. Because I know about them, Simone." Her face went white. "What?" "I know about the affair. Have for weeks. I've got photos, texts, everything." I showed her a few pictures from Elise's cloud backup. Nothing too explicit, but damning enough. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to keep being Elise's friend, and you're going to tell me everything she tells you about Greg. Every plan they make, every conversation they have. You're going to be my eyes and ears." "Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone in this town knows that you've been helping Elise cheat, that you've been lying to me, covering for her, probably even providing alibis. How do you think your husband will feel about that?" Simone's husband, Derek, was a deacon at the local church and notoriously jealous. The threat hit home. I could see it in the way her eyes widened, in the slight tremor in her hands. "You wouldn't? Try me." I stood up, dropped cash on the bar. "I'll be in touch, Simone. And remember, I'm nice, but nice doesn't always cut it." I walked out feeling like I'd won another round. Simone would crack eventually, probably sooner rather than later, and when she did, I'd have even more ammunition. At home, Elise was on the phone with Greg. I could hear her voice from the bedroom, low and intimate. I stood in the hallway listening. "I miss you too. No, he doesn't suspect anything. He's too busy with work to notice. I know, baby, I know. Soon, I promise. Once I figure out the best way to leave him, we can be together for real. I walked into the bedroom. Elise jumped, quickly said, I have to go, talk later, and hung up. Who was that? I asked. Just Simone. Girl talk. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. How was your day? Productive. Really productive. I started getting ready for bed, feeling her watching me. Hey, I've been thinking. We should do something fun this weekend. Maybe go out to dinner, reconnect a little. Things have been tense lately. She looked surprised, then pleased. Really? That would be nice, Tom. I'd like that. Good. I'll make reservations. I kissed her forehead, felt her relax against me. It's a date. She had no idea that the date I was planning had nothing to do with reconnecting, but she would. Soon enough, she would. The next day, I got a text from Simone. We need to talk. Not at the bar. Somewhere private. We met at the park, on a bench far from the playground where no one would overhear. Simone looked terrible. No makeup, hair pulled back, eyes red from crying. I can't do this, she said immediately. I can't spy on Elise. She's my friend. She's using you, Simone, just like she's using me, just like she's using everyone. You don't understand. Elise is... She's not happy. She hasn't been for years. Greg makes her happy. At my expense, at the expense of our marriage, our vows, everything we built together. I leaned forward. Look, I'm not asking you to betray her. I'm asking you to tell the truth. There's a difference. Simone wiped her eyes. What do you want to know? Everything. Start from the beginning. She did, and what she told me was worse than I'd imagined. The affair had been going on for almost a year. Greg had pursued Elise aggressively, whining and dining her, making her feel special in ways I apparently hadn't. They'd been to hotels, to his cabin at Crystal Lake, even to a weekend getaway in Boston that Elise had claimed was a work conference. She's planning to leave you, Simone said quietly. After your parents bleed you dry a little more, she wants to make sure you're in a bad financial position so she can get a better settlement. Nice. Real nice. I'm sorry, Tom. I really am. I told her this was wrong, but she wouldn't listen. She's convinced that Greg is her soulmate or something. I stood up, looked out at the park, at the families playing, at the normalcy that had been stripped from my own life. Thanks for telling me, Simone. I know it wasn't easy. What are you going to do? What I should have done weeks ago. I turned back to her. I'm going to fight back. The town festival was a Millbrook tradition. 3 days of food vendors, craft booths, live music, and enough small-town charm to make a Hallmark movie jealous. Everyone came, from the mayor to the high school kids looking for something to do. It was the perfect stage for what I had planned. Greg Fallon would be there, of course. He was sponsoring one of the main events, his company banner hanging over the beer garden like a monument to his own ego. Elise would be there too, playing the role of supportive business partner while secretly counting down the minutes until they could sneak away together. I arrived early on Saturday with Randy, both of us dressed casual, jeans, flannel shirts, work boots. We looked like what we were, working-class guys enjoying a local festival. Nobody paid us much attention, which was exactly what I wanted. You sure about this? Randy asked as we grabbed beers from the Fallon Development-sponsored booth. The irony wasn't lost on me. Positive. It's time everyone saw who Greg Fallon really is. We positioned ourselves near the main stage where a local band was setting up. The crowd was thick, probably 300 people, maybe more. I spotted Elise near the craft booths talking to some women from her office. She looked happy, relaxed, completely unaware that her world was about to implode. Greg arrived at noon, all smiles and handshakes, working the crowd like a politician. He was wearing expensive jeans and a polo shirt that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. His hair was perfect, his teeth were perfect, everything about him screamed success. I watched him glad hand the mayor, laugh at someone's joke, accept congratulations on his latest development project. Then he saw Elise. His whole face lit up in a way that made my hands clench into fists. She smiled back. That private smile I used to think was just for me, and they moved toward each other through the crowd. Now? Randy asked. Not yet. Let them get comfortable. They met near the beer garden, careful not to stand too close, maintaining the fiction of professional distance. But I could see it, the way Greg's hand brushed Elise's arm, the way she leaned into him just slightly, the way they looked at each other. Everyone could see it, if they bothered to look. I waited until they were surrounded by people, until the crowd was at its thickest, until the moment would have maximum impact. Then I walked up to them, Randy at my side, and raised my beer in a toast. Greg Fallon, I said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. The man who's been nailing my wife and my 2x4s. What a multi-talented guy. The effect was immediate and electric. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Elise's face went from happy to horrified in a heartbeat. Greg's smile froze, then melted into something ugly. Tom, what the hell? Oh, don't be modest, Greg. Everyone should know what a great businessman you are. Cutting corners on construction projects, bribing inspectors, and finding time to sleep with other men's wives. That's what I call efficiency. You're drunk, Greg said, but his voice was tight. Someone get this guy out of here. I'm not drunk. I'm just tired of pretending I don't know what everyone else in this town apparently does. I turned to the crowd, which had grown larger, phones out, recording everything. My wife, Elise, and Greg here have been having an affair for almost a year. They've been to his cabin at Crystal Lake, to hotels, to weekend getaways, all while I've been working my ass off to keep a roof over our heads and paying extortion money to my own parents. Tom, stop it! Elise grabbed my arm. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with panic. You're making a scene. Good. It's about time someone did. I shook her off. You want to know the best part? She's been waiting for me to go broke before filing for divorce. That way she can get a better settlement. Isn't that sweet? Greg stepped forward, his jaw tight. You need to shut your mouth right now. Or what? You'll hit me? Go ahead. Give everyone here a show. I spread my arms wide. Come on, big shot. Show everyone what kind of man you really are. He swung. I saw it coming a mile away. A wide, clumsy haymaker that had more anger than technique behind it. I sidestepped easily, and Greg's momentum carried him forward into a decorative barrel planter full of mud and flowers. He went down hard, face first, and came up sputtering, covered in dirt. The crowd gasped, then laughed. Phones were everywhere now, capturing every second. Greg Fallon, the town's golden boy, sitting in the mud like a fool. Oops, I said. Main roads are tricky. Or is it Maine festivals? You son of a... Greg tried to get up, slipped, went down again. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Randy stepped forward, his bulk imposing. I think you should stay down, buddy, before you embarrass yourself more. Elise was crying now, mascara running down her face. Tom, please, can we talk about this privately? Why? You didn't mind conducting your affair privately. I figured you wouldn't mind discussing it publicly. I turned back to the crowd, found the faces I was looking for. My parents, standing near the craft booths, their expressions shocked. And hey, while we're sharing family secrets, let's talk about Robert and Linda Harlan, my loving parents. Did you know they've been extorting $1,200 a month from me, calling it rent for raising me, even though I paid back every cent they ever gave me? But family takes care of family, right, Dad? My father's face went purple. You ungrateful. No, Dad, I'm not ungrateful. I'm done. Done paying you, done pretending we're a happy family, done being the disappointment you can squeeze for cash. I looked around at the crowd, at the shocked faces, at the phones recording everything. I'm done with all of it. I walked away then, Randy beside me, leaving Elise crying and Greg covered in mud and my parents sputtering with rage. Behind me, I could hear the crowd exploding into conversation, could hear my name being repeated over and over. By tonight, everyone in Millbrook would know the truth. By tomorrow, it would be all over social media. That was intense, Randy said as we reached my truck. That was necessary. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine. My hands were shaking, adrenaline coursing through my system. Phase 1 complete. What's Phase 2? I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Phase 2 is where things get really interesting. Over the next few days, the fallout was spectacular. The video of Greg falling in the mud went viral locally, racking up thousands of views. Elise was the subject of endless gossip. At the grocery store, at the gym, everywhere she went. Her office put her on administrative leave, pending an investigation into her relationship with a business partner, which was corporate speak for, we're trying to figure out how to fire you without getting sued. Greg's business took a hit too. Several clients pulled their contracts after I anonymously sent them documentation of his corner cutting and bribery. The town council launched an investigation into his development projects. His perfect reputation was crumbling, and I had a front row seat. But the best part, the part that gave me the most satisfaction, was my parents. The day after the festival, my mother called, her voice shrill. How could you humiliate us like that? Easy. I opened my mouth and told the truth. You made us look like monsters. You made yourselves look like monsters, Mom. I just pointed it out. I was in my workshop, organizing tools, completely calm. And by the way, you're not getting any more rent money. That gravy train has left the station. Your father will what? Disown me? Too late? I'm disowning you, both of you. Have a nice life?" I hung up. She called back 6 times. I didn't answer. Eventually, the calls stopped. Elise tried a different approach. She came home one evening, her eyes red from crying, and found me packing her things into boxes. "What are you doing?" "Helping you move out. I figured you'd want to be with Greg now that everything's out in the open." "Tom, please, can we talk about this?" "What's there to talk about? You cheated. You lied. You waited for me to go broke so you could divorce me more easily. What part of that requires discussion?" "I made a mistake. I know I did. But we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can—" "No." I set down the box I was holding, looked at her directly. "We can't, because I don't want to. You broke something, Elise, and it can't be fixed. So you're going to take your things, you're going to move in with Greg or your parents or whoever will have you, and you're going to sign the divorce papers my lawyer sends you. That's how this ends. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. There's a difference." I went back to packing. "You have until Friday to get your stuff out. After that, I'm changing the locks." She left that night. I watched her car pull out of the driveway, watched the taillights disappear, and felt something loosen in my chest. Not quite relief, not quite happiness, but something close to both. I was free. Finally, completely free. But I wasn't done yet. The divorce papers were filed on Monday. Patricia Chen, my lawyer, had done excellent work. Every piece of evidence was documented, every asset was protected. Elise would get nothing beyond what she'd brought into the marriage, and even that was debatable given her infidelity and planned financial manipulation. "She's going to fight this," Patricia warned. "People like her always do." "Let her fight. I've got right on my side. Right doesn't always win in court, Tom, but we've got a strong case." Strong didn't begin to cover it. Over the next few weeks, as the legal process ground forward, more information came to light. Simone, feeling guilty about her role in the affair, gave a deposition detailing everything Elise had told her. Mrs. Twombly provided testimony about seeing Elise's car at Greg's condo multiple times. Even some of Elise's co-workers came forward, tired of covering for her late meetings. But the real bombshell came from an unexpected source: Margot, Elise's HR sidekick at work. It turned out that Margot had been embezzling from the company, and Elise had known about it, had even helped cover it up in exchange for Margot's help in hiding the affair from anyone at the office who might have reported it to me. I didn't discover this on my own. Margot's scheme fell apart when an audit revealed discrepancies, and she tried to cut a deal by implicating Elise. The company fired both of them, and suddenly Elise wasn't just facing a divorce, she was facing potential criminal charges. "This is better than I could have planned," Patricia said when she told me the news. "Elise's credibility is shot. No judge is going to be sympathetic to her now." "Good." I felt no pity, no remorse. Elise had made her choices. Now she was living with the consequences. Greg Fallon wasn't faring much better. The investigation into his development projects had uncovered enough violations to tie him up in legal battles for years. Several of his investors pulled out, leaving him cash-strapped and desperate. His perfect life was unraveling, thread by thread, and I was watching it happen with grim satisfaction. But I still had one more score to settle: my parents. I'd been thinking about them a lot since the festival, about all the years of criticism and control, all the ways they'd made me feel small. The rent extortion had been the final straw, but it was really just the culmination of a lifetime of manipulation. So I decided to give them a taste of their own medicine. I started by doing some digging into their finances. It wasn't hard. I'd co-signed that truck loan years ago, which meant I had access to some of their financial information. What I found was interesting. Dad had been lying about Mom's medical expenses. There were no expensive treatments, no health crisis. The money I'd been paying them had gone toward Dad's new truck, toward a vacation to Florida, toward maintaining the lifestyle they thought they deserved. I documented everything, then made some calls. First to the IRS, reporting the rent payments as unreported income. Then to my aunts and uncles, my parents' siblings, sharing the evidence of their lies and manipulation. Finally, to the local newspaper, which ran a story about financial elder abuse, not naming my parents specifically, but including enough details that everyone in town would know who they were talking about. The response was swift and brutal. My parents became pariahs in their own community. Their friends stopped calling. Their church asked them to step back from their leadership roles. Even their own siblings cut contact, disgusted by what they'd done. Dad called me, furious. "You're destroying us." "No, Dad, I'm just telling the truth. You destroyed yourselves. We raised you. We gave you everything. You gave me a roof and food, which is the bare minimum required by law. Everything else I earned myself, and you've spent the last 44 years reminding me that I wasn't good enough, that I'd never measure up, that I owed you for the privilege of existing. I was in my workshop, surrounded by the tools of my trade, the business I'd built with my own hands. Well, I don't owe you anything anymore. We're done. You can't just watch me. I hung up, blocked their numbers. Blocked my mother's number, too, when she tried to call. I was finished with them, finished with their toxicity, finished with letting them make me feel less than I was. The final confrontation came in late October, 2 months after the festival. Greg Fallon had been trying to salvage his business, but the legal troubles were too much. He'd lost most of his investors, most of his clients, and was facing bankruptcy. In a last-ditch effort to save himself, he'd planned a big open house at his Crystal Lake development, hoping to drum up interest and sales. I heard about it through Randy, who'd heard about it from a subcontractor who'd worked on the project. Greg's desperate, Randy said. He's pulling out all the stops, free food, live music, the whole 9 yards, trying to get people excited about buying lakeside property. Is it this weekend? Saturday, 2 to 6. I smiled. Perfect. Saturday afternoon, Randy and I drove out to Crystal Lake. The open house was in full swing. Cars everywhere, people touring the model homes, Greg playing the gracious host despite the stress lines around his eyes. I spotted Elise there too, standing off to the side, looking lost. She'd aged in the past 2 months, her face harder, her eyes tired. We didn't go to the open house itself. Instead, we went to Greg's cabin, the one he'd used for his trysts with Elise, the one that appeared in so many of the photos I'd found. I had a key, Simone had provided it, part of her ongoing penance for her role in the affair. Inside, Randy set up the equipment we'd brought, a Bluetooth speaker system, powerful enough to broadcast across the lake to where the open house was happening. I pulled out my phone, queued up the audio files I'd prepared, recordings of Elise and Greg's most incriminating conversations, edited together into a greatest hits compilation of their affair. You sure about this? Randy asked. Absolutely. I hit play. The speakers crackled to life, loud enough to echo across the water. Greg's voice smooth and confident. When are you going to leave him? Elise's voice, breathy and excited. Soon. I'm just waiting for the right moment. His parents are bleeding him dry anyway. He'll be broke soon enough, and then the divorce will be easy. More conversations, more damning evidence, all of it playing at full volume for everyone at the open house to hear. I watched through binoculars as people stopped touring homes, as heads turned toward the lake, as recognition dawned on faces. Greg was running now, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from, trying to shut it down. But it was too late. The damage was done. People were leaving, getting in their cars, pulling out their phones to record and share. The open house was over. We packed up our equipment and left before anyone could trace the source back to us. As we drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Satisfaction. Pure, uncomplicated satisfaction. That was cold, man, Randy said, but he was grinning. That was justice. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Greg. The open house was a disaster. Not a single property sold, and several existing buyers backed out after hearing the recordings. Within a week, Fallon Development filed for bankruptcy. Greg lost everything, his business, his reputation, his future. Elise didn't fare much better. The divorce was finalized in November, with her getting almost nothing. No alimony, no share of my business, just her personal belongings and a mountain of legal debt. The embezzlement charges were still pending, hanging over her head like a sword. I saw her one last time in early December. She showed up at my workshop, looking thin and desperate. Tom, I need help. No, please, I have nowhere else to go. My parents won't help me. Greg won't return my calls. I'm facing criminal charges. And whose fault is that, Elise? She started crying, real tears this time, not the manipulative ones she'd used throughout our marriage. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I made terrible choices, and I hurt you, and I know I don't deserve your help. But please, you're right. You don't deserve my help. You don't deserve anything from me. I set down the piece of wood I'd been sanding, looked at her directly. You called me boring. You laughed about how clueless I was. You waited for me to be at my weakest before planning to leave me. You used me, betrayed me, and tried to destroy me, and now you want my help? I know I don't have the right to ask. You don't, so don't. I turned back to my work. The door's behind you. Don't let it hit you on the way out. She stood there for a long moment, crying, then finally left. I watched her go, felt nothing but a distant sense of closure. That chapter of my life was over. She was someone else's problem now. My parents tried to reconcile in January, after the holidays they'd spent alone. Mom called from a number I didn't have blocked, caught me off guard. Tom, it's Mom. Please don't hang up. I almost did, but curiosity kept me on the line. What do you want? We want to apologize. Your father and we've been talking, and we realize we've made mistakes. We want to make things right. There's no making this right, Mom. You extorted money from me for months. You lied about medical expenses. You tried to use my marriage problems to your advantage. You spent my entire life making me feel like I wasn't good enough. That's not something you fix with an apology. We're your parents, Tom. We love you. No, you don't. You love the idea of having a son you can control, but I'm not that person anymore. I was standing in my living room, looking out at the snow-covered yard, at the peace I'd built for myself. I'm done being your disappointment. I'm done being your ATM. I'm done being anything to you at all. Tom, please, goodbye, Mom. I hung up, blocked the number, and finally, completely, closed that door. Spring came to Millbrook with the usual fanfare, melting snow, muddy roads, the smell of wet earth, and new beginnings. I stood in my workshop on a Saturday morning in April, surveying the progress on my latest project. A custom dining table for the mayor, intricate woodwork that would take weeks to complete. It was the kind of job I loved, the kind that required skill and patience and attention to detail. Randy walked in, carrying coffee from the diner. Thought you could use this. You thought right. I took the cup, savored the warmth. What's the word around town? The usual. Mrs. Patterson's cat is missing again. High school baseball team is undefeated. Oh, and Greg Fallon was spotted working at the hardware store in the next town over. I looked up. Seriously? Absolutely serious. Stock boy. Minimum wage. Apparently he can't get hired anywhere else in his field. The bankruptcy and scandal pretty much blacklisted him. I tried to feel sympathy and couldn't quite manage it. What goes around comes around, I guess. What about Elise? Last I heard, she took a plea deal on the embezzlement charges. Probation, restitution, community service. She's living with her parents in Augusta, working retail. I went back to sanding the table. Not my problem anymore. And your parents? Haven't heard from them in months. Don't expect to. I looked at Randy, this friend who'd stood by me through everything. I'm good, man. Really good. Better than I've been in years. It was true. The divorce had freed me in ways I hadn't expected. Without Elise's constant criticism, without my parents' manipulation, without the weight of trying to be something I wasn't, I'd found a kind of peace. My business was thriving, word had spread about my craftsmanship, and I had more work than I could handle. I'd reconnected with old friends, made new ones, started dating a woman named Jennifer who owned the bookstore downtown and actually seemed to like me for who I was. Life was good. Not perfect, but good. And that was enough. The final piece of my revenge came in late May when I received a letter from Patricia Chen. Inside was a check, the proceeds from selling Elise's car, which had been sitting in my workshop all this time. The insurance company had eventually declared it a total loss after the theft, paid out the claim to Elise, and I'd bought the salvage title for pennies on the dollar. Spent a few weekends fixing it up, then sold it for a tidy profit. The check was for $8,000. I looked at it, thought about my father's rent extortion, about the $1,200 a month I'd paid for half a year. $7,200 total. This check more than covered it. I took a photo of the check, texted it to my mother's old number with a simple message. Rent's paid in full. We're even now. Don't contact me again. Then I deposited the check, took Jennifer out to a nice dinner, and toasted to new beginnings. A week later, I was at the Rusty Anchor with Randy and some of the crew, celebrating the completion of the mayor's dining table. The place was packed, the usual Saturday night crowd, and I was holding court at our table, telling the story of how I'd nearly cut my thumb off finishing the table's edge. That's when Elise walked in. She looked different, thinner, older, worn down by life. She was with someone, a guy I didn't recognize, and they took a table in the corner. I watched her scan the room, saw the moment she spotted me, saw her face go pale. You okay? Randy asked quietly. Yeah, fine. Elise said something to her companion, then stood up and walked over to our table. The conversations around us quieted as people recognized her, sensing the drama that was about to unfold. Tom, she said, her voice small. Can I talk to you? Just for a minute? I looked at her, this woman I'd spent 15 years with, this woman who'd betrayed me in every way that mattered. I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, no lingering attachment, just a distant curiosity about what she could possibly have to say. Sure, make it quick. She glanced at Randy and the others, clearly wanting privacy, but I wasn't about to give her that. Whatever she had to say, she could say it in front of witnesses. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, for everything. I know that doesn't change anything, and I know you probably don't care, but I needed to say it. You deserved better than what I gave you." "Yeah, I did." She flinched at the bluntness of my response. "I've had a lot of time to think about what I did, about the choices I made. I was selfish and cruel, and I hurt you for no good reason. I threw away something real for something that was never going to last." "You're right. You did. I don't expect forgiveness. I wanted you to know that I realize what I lost. You're a good man, Tom. You always were. I was too stupid to see it." I took a sip of my beer, let her words hang in the air for a moment. "Elise, I appreciate the apology. I do, but it doesn't change anything. You made your choices, I made mine, and now we're both living with the consequences. You got what you wanted. Freedom from boring old me. I got what I wanted. Freedom from you. So let's just leave it at that." "That's it? That's all you have to say? What else is there?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but relief that she was no longer my problem. "You wanted to know if I'd forgive you. I won't. You wanted to know if we could be friends. We can't. You wanted, I don't know, closure maybe? Well, here it is. We're done. Completely, totally done. You go live your life, I'll live mine, and we'll both be better off for it." Tears were running down her face now. "I really did love you once, you know." "Maybe, but not enough, and that's okay. I'm over it." She stood there for another moment, then nodded slowly and walked back to her table. I watched her grab her purse, say something to her companion, and leave the bar. The door closed behind her, and the conversations around us resumed, the drama over. "Cold, man," Randy said, but he was smiling. "Ice cold." She got what she deserved. They all did. I raised my beer. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," the table echoed, and we drank. 2 months later, in July, I got word that my father had passed away. Heart attack, sudden, no warning. My mother called to tell me, her voice flat and emotionless. "The funeral's on Thursday. I thought you should know." "Okay, thanks for telling me. Will you come?" I thought about it. Thought about the man who'd spent my entire life making me feel small, who'd extorted money from me, who'd never once said he was proud of me. I thought about closure, about forgiveness, about being the bigger person. "No," I said finally. "I won't." "Tom, he was your father." "He was a bully and a manipulator, and I'm done pretending otherwise." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mom. I really am. But I can't mourn a man who never treated me like a son. I hope you understand." She was quiet for a long moment. "I do. I'm sorry, Tom. For everything." "Me too, Mom. Me too." I hung up, and that was that. I didn't go to the funeral. Didn't send flowers. Didn't reach out to extended family. I just let it go. Let him go. Let all of it go. And in letting go, I found something I'd been searching for my whole life. Peace. The summer passed in a blur of work and laughter and quiet contentment. Jennifer and I grew closer, spending weekends at the lake, evenings at her bookstore, mornings in bed talking about everything and nothing. She knew my history, knew what I'd been through, and she didn't judge me for it. She just accepted me, scars and all. In September, Randy and I landed the biggest contract of our careers, a full renovation of the old Millbrook Theater, a historic building that had been closed for years. It was a 2-year project, the kind of job that would put our company on the map, that would prove once and for all that I'd made something of myself. We celebrated at the Rusty Anchor, the whole crew there, toasting to success and hard work and second chances. I looked around at these people, my friends, my team, my chosen family, and felt a surge of gratitude so strong it almost hurt. "Speech!" someone called out, and the table took up the chant. "Speech! Speech!" I stood up, beer in hand, and looked at the faces around me. "I'm not much for speeches," I said, "but I'll say this. 3 years ago, I was in a bad place. My marriage was falling apart, my parents were bleeding me dry, and I felt like I was drowning. But I made a choice. I chose to fight back. I chose to stop being a victim and start being the architect of my own life. And you know what? It was the best decision I ever made." Cheers erupted around the table. I raised my beer higher. "So here's to fighting back. Here's to standing up for yourself. Here's to knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less. Here's to revenge, served cold and satisfying. And here's to all of you for having my back when I needed it most." "To revenge," Randy called out. "To revenge," the table echoed, and we drank deep. Later that night, as Jennifer and I walked home under a sky full of stars, she took my hand and squeezed it. "You seem happy," she said. "I am. Happier than I've been in years." "Good. You deserve it." She stopped, turned to face me. You know what I love about you, Tom? You didn't let them break you. You could have turned bitter, could have let the anger consume you, but you didn't. You fought back, you won, and then you moved on. That takes strength. I had help. Maybe. But you did the hard part. You chose to be better than they were. I pulled her close, kissed her forehead. I chose to be myself. That's all. We walked the rest of the way in comfortable silence, and when we reached my house, our house now, really, since she'd moved in last month, I paused on the porch and looked back at the town. Millbrook, with all its gossip and drama and small-town charm. It had been the stage for my humiliation and my triumph, the place where I'd lost everything and found myself. I didn't regret a single moment of it. Inside, I checked my phone one last time before bed. There was a message from Simone. Heard Greg got fired from the hardware store for stealing. Karma's a bastard, huh? I smiled, typed back, yeah, it really is. Then I turned off my phone, climbed into bed next to Jennifer, and fell asleep with a clear conscience and a satisfied smile. They'd tried to break me, my wife, her lover, my parents, all of them. They'd tried to use me, manipulate me, destroy me, but I'd fought back, and I'd won. Not through violence or illegal means, but through truth and patience and the simple act of refusing to be a victim anymore. I'd gotten my revenge, and it had been sweet. But more importantly, I'd gotten my life back. And that was the real victory.